and I'm the Forage Extension Agent in Chesterfield County. And we want to welcome you to the Virginia Virtual Farm to Table program. The purpose of this program is to highlight Virginia grown produce and livestock raised on farms across the Commonwealth, and also demonstrate how to create a delicious and nutritious meal with the highlighted ingredient. This educational program will highlight Virginia agriculture, community nutrition, and farm to table connections, and is brought to you by Virginia Cooperative Extension, the educational outreach component of Virginia's two land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. Virginia Cooperative Extension delivers educational programming through a network of faculty at these two universities, 108 county and city offices, 11 agricultural research and extension centers, and 6 4-H educational centers. If you have not done so already, I encourage you to connect with your local Virginia Cooperative Extension office and learn more about the programs they offer. Today, our session will focus on beef, and I'm pleased to introduce our 3 presenters for the session. Tim Mize is the Agricultural and Natural Resources Extension Agent in Fauquier County. Tim has a degree in animal science and provides his local agricultural community with support in farm management, forage grass management, agronomic recommendations, and so much more. He has vast experience in production and retail agriculture, particularly in the cattle industry. Our next presenter will be Chris Allen. She runs Fresh Branch Farm. It's a small but growing farm located in southern Chesterfield County. And off the farm, Chris also works as the 4-H technician for Chesterfield Extension. Chris's farm focuses on Piedmontese cattle, a breed that produces lean and tender beef due to their double muscling gene. And last but not least, we will join Danielle Wilson in the kitchen to learn a scrumptious meatball recipe using lean grass-fed ground beef, along with other items from a variety of food groups, and puts your leftovers to good use. Danielle is a former VCE summer intern and currently the Foods and Nutrition Program Educator with Chesterfield County Extension. Our Q&A monitor for today is Ruth Wallace. She's the 4-H Extension Agent in Buckingham County. If you have questions for our presenters, please put them in the Q&A box, and Ruth will try and get as many questions addressed as possible. There is a chat box feature, but please don't use that for the questions, as we might not be monitoring that as much. Please just utilize the Q&A box. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Tim, who's our first speaker.
Thank you, Bethany, and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. And I'm going to give a very brief overview of the cattle industry in Virginia. And so we're going to go kind of quickly, but hopefully we'll touch on some of the important things that we do here. So we know cattle have been in what we now know as the United States since the 15th century, but there are records of surviving cattle coming in on the second supply ship to Jamestown. So we have records, and Virginia's had cattle continuously since then. The first ones brought over were mostly for draft and breeding and milk, and actually things were so tenuous that it was a capital offense to kill one of them or any of the livestock until they built up. Here in Virginia, cattle are our second biggest industry. Poultry is first. But just in sales from cattle, and this doesn't count any of the income base from employees or anything like that, is about 800 million. Here in Virginia, we have about 725,000 brood cows, and so we'll talk about that in a second, but that's the cows actually producing the calves. And at any time of the year, there's about 1.4 million head of cattle in the state. We do have some cattle on feed, and again, we'll talk about that in a second, but not many. Most of our cattle actually leave the state and go out west or into the Pennsylvania to be finished out, and we'll talk about why that is. And so what I'm going to touch on here is basically 4 things that are happening across the state at any one time. So Chris, you want to go ahead and hit the next one? So basically, we break this down, but we have what we call seed stock operators, and they are the ones that are in charge of the genetics for the future. So they're going to be the purebred breeders for the most part. We do have some composites now that are actually using different breeds to produce, but that's where most of the bulls that are going to be purchased and used for our commercial cows are coming from. This is a high investment opportunity as far as they're using the latest technologies. There's a lot of employment. There's a lot of equipment needed. And basically in this level, there are two types. There's the elite, and that is the producers that are breeding the bulls that are going to be at bull studs. And then we have what we call multipliers. And these are still purebred breeders, but actually they're using the semen from those bulls from the elite breeders. And that's what is producing the majority of bulls that are going out into the countryside. Here in Virginia, we are basically a cow-calf operation. So that basically means is that we have all the mama cows. And we are ranked 20th in the nation as far as having cows here. And so these are the cows as you're driving down the road, most likely you're going to see. They're going to calve in the spring or the fall. They're going to produce a calf, and that calf's going to be weaned off in about 7 months. And it's going to weigh somewhere 400, 650 pounds, could weigh a little more, but basically that's where it's going to fall in. And this is really a forage-based system here because we're working with mature animals. This is very land intensive. It takes 2 to 3 acres per cow, depending on your management. And we do know that about 60 to 7% of the total cost of this enterprise is coming from the feed cost of those cows. So forage is the best system we have there. That's not to say that some other ingredients don't enter at times. So, you know, there's a lot of byproducts that come from the distilling and things like corn gluten from the sugar industry that are used. But for the most part, this is a forage-based system that these cows are working on 12 months a year. Okay, Chris? So after those calves leave, there's a couple of options. Like I said, they're going to be weaned somewhere between 400 to 650 pounds. They're not quite big enough to go into a feeding system yet. So they're going to go kind of one of two ways. There's what we call a backgrounder. And so the most stressful time of a calf's life is at weaning time. And so, you know, there's the opportunity for illness at that point. So backgrounders are the producers that are going to purchase those calves, and they're going to get them through this weaning period. They're going to get them over it, get them healthy. They may have these calves for 45 days or 6 months. It sort of depends on their feed and the cattle market. They're going to utilize a lot of stored feeds probably in this situation because the big majority of these calves are going to be weaned in the fall. Generally, this is a high management group just because they're purchasing these calves at a very stressful time. So they're going to come in, they're going to start putting loads together. And they may put a couple 100 pounds on these calves. It depends on the time of the year and what they came in weighing. The next system, and this is still important in Virginia, is the stocker system. And this is basically running those calves during the growing season of grass. So you'll see calves that are purchased sometime maybe in April, could be a little earlier, maybe a little later, just depends on availability and our forage production. But actually, these are calves that are going to go out, and we're going to put another 200 pounds on them, hopefully, and try to get them up to heavier weights before they enter the final feeding system. This is totally built generally on forage, the cheapest system, and we're looking for cheap gains. So they make money by buying these calves and then hopefully selling, putting gains on, and making money. This can be a risky venture at sometimes just because you never know where the market's going to be. So oftentimes, you know, you could buy high and sell low, which is generally where I end up. But hopefully you're going to make some money on the gain on these. And this is just a picture of some feeder heifers that are actually been grazing all summer long. And so as you see out there, there is a trough. And so in the stockering system, majority is grass, but in this situation, they were also being fed about 1.5 pounds of distillers. So that was just a supplement to them. Okay, Chris. So after these calves are reaching these heavier weights, and generally we're looking something probably north of 700 pounds, they're going to enter into a finishing stage. And so this is the last really stage for these heifers or steers they're going to go through before they actually reach harvest weight. And there are two ways that they do that. One is the grain finishing, and this has sort of been, in this country at least, the norm since probably 1950. This is a high starch diet. Depending on where you're located, it may be corn-based. And so these calves are going to go coming in 700, 800, 900 pounds, and then they're going to finish out somewhere between 1,000 and 1,350. And you can see there, I give a lot of ranges, and they're wide because in the cattle industry, there's a lot of genetic variation. And then, of course, we have the sexes to deal with. So generally, the heifers are going to finish on the On the lighter end, the steers are going to go a little bit heavier. And then if we're talking about different breeds, some of those are going to finish out heavier. Generally, this system is based on the USDA grading system that you've probably seen in the store when we talk about select and choice and prime. And generally, we're targeting choice in this grade. So most of the cattle with modern genetics and on a high grain diet are going to finish there. Depending on how old they were when they came in and how much they weighed, they may be in there for 14 to 30 months. Generally, the average is probably somewhere closer to that 19 to 20 months. But again, it depends on if they were stockers and went through a whole nother year of grazing before they went in. We do not have many feeding systems in this state. Like I said earlier, the majority of our calves leave here. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is we're a corn deficit state here. We have a large poultry feeding industry. And so we import a lot of corn and they take a lot of corn. Also, weather is a huge issue here. So if you look at where most feedlots are, they are in areas that have low rainfall. And so mud is not the issue that it would be here. Also, we do still sell quite a few calves up into the Northeast, but most of those are going into some kind of feeding barn. So that's how they get around that. The other thing, and you probably heard more about this lately, is grass finishing. And so there are a lot of terms when we talk about grass finish and grass diets. Like I've already said, the cattle are mostly grass diets to start with, but if they don't go into a high grain diet, we do what's called grass finishing. And so what we do here is we can grow grass. We have lots of rainfall, we do well. And so they can go into a system where they totally finish on forage. This system requires a lot of management. So if you think about, you've got to produce forage for 12 months, and at some point in there, you're going to have some stored forage most likely, but it takes a lot of planning to keep those calves growing and to keep quality up there. So this system, they're going to grow a little bit slower. They're still on a high forage, high quality diet. They can still do 2 pounds, maybe better, but they probably won't be where these grain-fed cattle are. So it takes a little bit longer to get there. And generally, we're looking at breeds, and I say these are a lot of averages that we throw in, and of course, an extension, it depends. But generally, we're looking for a little bit more efficient cattle that do better on forage diets. So as a rule, they probably tend to be a little bit lighter on their finished weights than it would be from a feedlot. And the other thing is the USDA grades were really built around feedlots. So when we're talking about choice and select and prime and grass finish, they don't often meet out well because the grass finished cattle tend to be leaner. And so they may have adequate marbling and same quality. They just don't carry that external fat. So oftentimes we have a hard time matching up the USDA grades. Okay, Chris, I think that was my last one.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. So my name is Chris Allen, and I run Fresh Branch Farm with my husband and our young children. We are located in southern Chesterfield. We have a couple of things going on our farm. So we host a large agritourism event, and this year it's going to hit around mid-August of a pick your own sunflower field. We also have a large free-range laying flock of hens, but our most intensive work is our cattle. So we have a herd of about 9 cows, and they are of Piedmontese background. We are a cow-calf operation, just like Tim was talking about, and we focus on being a grass-fed, grass-finished producer, and we sell direct to consumer. We do right well with this. We sell by word of mouth or social media, and we do have a waiting list, so it tends to work pretty well out here in southern Chesterfield. So you see my 2 kids standing in the barn door. That's Charlotte and Moses, and they have feed pans. We are grass-fed, grass-finished, but we do feed maybe a scoop of feed just to make sure that everybody can come through the handling facility. They're used to being around us. Kids don't like to help, but they're farm kids, so here they are, and that probably explains Moses' face a little bit. Here is a picture of our forage. So this is the height of summer, and as you can see, it gets a little bit taller than our cows. These are happy cows. We work real hard. My husband is a soil scientist, But above all else, he calls himself a grass farmer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get that forage for our cows. So you can see in my picture, this is what we planted in May. We planted a mix of buckwheat, cowpeas, pearl millet, sunflower, and sorghum Sudan grass. This provides all of the nutrients that our cows need. Sunflowers we just kind of toss in because I like them, and it just makes the field look real pretty. Okay, so we planted May 23rd, and I have a couple videos that will come up next, but just for reference, here I am standing yesterday in the field that we planted. I think it's interesting to note, if you can look, you can kind of see the darker green areas. We do intensive grazing or strip grazing, so the cows get just a little bit, and then we move the fence every 12 hours. But you can see where they poop on the field tends to be a greener spot. So that's where a nitrogen bit is, and it seems to really work. So I have 3 videos that are going to come up, and Lena, you can go ahead and start those, and I'll talk us through what we're looking at. So here's my husband and Moses and Charlotte, and what we're doing is we are mixing those seeds. Our bags are lined up, and we kind of layer them. Kids like to help with this. I'm standing on top of our no-till seed drill. We're peeking in the hopper up top, and you can see how well those seeds are mixed. We make sure that they're mixed in that big can before pouring them in the hopper. And then we're looking out onto the field, and there are the cows in the barn lot. Out back, you see in the back pasture how it is brown, so that pasture is getting ready. So now we're going to kind of walk through our no-till seed drill. Up top is where I was standing at the hopper. Now we're going to peek down, and these black tubes that you see all along the bottom, that's where they drop from the hopper down to the tubes. And they're going to go all the way down. Now I'm coming down to the side, and we're going to look to see it drops through, and this wheel that I'm going to reach out and touch, it's sharp. It got me. And then I'm going to spin it. So that cuts the soil. It'll drop through there into the trench, and then this big heavy wheel kind of covers it. We get good soil contact to that seed. All right, so now we're jumping. So you're looking at the field, and you can see from our last planting in the fall, that was forage that was ate through the winter. We took care of that, so we wouldn't have any weed pressure. This is John driving. I'm going to walk up behind him. It's a lot of looking behind because we want to make sure that we are not overlapping. We don't want too much seed in our troughs, and we don't want to overcrowd it so that it doesn't reach its full potential. John goes right fast, but not too fast, but we have a lot of acres to plant, and kind of a pretty good window. We watch our soil temp, and that lets us know. So you can see the troughs that are cut, and if you kind of dug down in there, you would see the seeds that gets dropped. We stop every once in a while and measure it. This is John backing up, and he couldn't see me. Don't worry, I won't get run over. Thank you, Lena. All right. I'm going to share my screen again. So another part of our farm is that John and I are both AI certified through Virginia Tech. So we manage our herd by buying straws of semen from a Piedmontese Piedmontese herd in Georgia. And then hopefully, if we do it right, we end up with a baby cow. And we can pick what bulls we want and what genetics we want to pass on. We can also manage when our calves are born, and this helps us as a farmer. So right now we currently harvest 1 steer or cow per season. This is our last steer that we processed. So he, as you can see, is a big guy. He has a double muscling gene. Our beef is very lean. You don't see the marbling that we people kind of think about when they think about cuts of meat. This is a picture of my dinner the other night. This was an NY strip. It's very lean. Very tasty and pretty good. So now we're gonna bop it to Danielle.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Wilson and I'm just going to talk about cuts of beef, where you can buy your beef, and what to look for when you're shopping for beef. And then I'll show you a little bit how to use Chris's Piedmontese cattle ground beef to make a delicious meatball recipe. So beef is from a domesticated cattle and it's divided into both primal and subprimal cuts. And the primal cuts are chuck, brisket, and shank. Rib, short plate, short loin, sirloin, and flank and round. And these primal and subprimal cuts are based on the amount of tissue, and they just determine how long you're going to cook them. So you can purchase your beef at a local grocery store, at a butcher shop, or from your favorite farmer. We like Chris's ground beef because it's nice and lean, it's nice and tender, and I can put in just pretty much any recipe that I think of. So when you're going to the store or you're buying beef, you're just going to look for a bright red color. As you notice probably when you go out to dinner and you get a steak, like usually if it's well done, it's pretty brown, gray in the middle. That's just because that oxygen has oxidized outside of it. So when you're cooking your beef at home, you're going to cook your steak to 145 degrees. And if you're ground beef, you have it to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're going to store beef in the refrigerator, how you store it is at the top of your refrigerator, you're going to have your ready to eat food or your leftovers. Then you're going to have your seafood, then your cuts of beef and pork, then your ground meat and seafood, and then your whole chicken and ground poultry, just because you don't want the residue from the beef and that blood to drip onto any of your other food to prevent cross-contamination. So you should store your ground beef in the fridge for about 1 to 2 days. And then if you have like a beef roast or steaks or chucks, you can leave them in the fridge for about 3 to 5 days. After that, you should make sure you're cooking it or freezing it. So there's 2 types of cooking methods for beef. You can do it with a dry heat or a moist heat preparation. Dry heat is when you grill or broil, roast, or fry it. Moist heats are when you braise it, you simmer it, you steam it, or use the microwave. With dry heat, it's usually for very tender cuts of meat, like your loin and your sirloin, and then they don't use any moisture or steam or water or broth or anything. With moist heat, you're using water, steam, liquid, like your favorite broth, vegetable, chicken, and that heat is transferring to your food. So the recipe that we're going to look at today is for braised brown rice meatballs. So this is a moist heat cooking method, and the heat is transferring from the vegetable juice into our nice lean ground beef, and that's using Chris's ground beef. So Lena, you can go ahead and play the video. Hi, my name is Danielle Wilson, and I am the Food and Nutrition Program Educator with Chesterfield County Cooperative Extension. Welcome to our demo kitchen. Today we're going to be making braised brown rice meatballs. This recipe is from the American Diabetes Association. It's a great recipe because it is low in sodium, it's heart healthy, it is full of protein, whole grains, and all the vitamins and minerals. So let's get started. First, to make sure we're being food safe, we're going to wash our hands for 20 seconds and we're going to preheat our oven. This recipe includes 1 pound of lean ground beef. It also has 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and 1 teaspoon of black pepper, a cup of leftover brown rice, and that's just from my kitchen last night when I made dinner, and a cup of chopped white onion, and 1 egg that has been whisked. So we're just gonna mix everything together except for 2 cups of vegetable juice. That's gonna braise our meatballs. Braising is when you steam and cook the meatballs in a liquid, and you usually braise items when they are very lean and have a less amount of fat. So let's just whisk our egg. This egg is just going to bind it all together, help us have that structure. And then we're also I'm gonna add everything else. So we have 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Make sure you're getting out all that spices. And if you are not on a heart healthy or low sodium diet, you can just season to taste. 1 teaspoon of salt equals about 2,300 milligrams of sodium, which is the amount that you should have during the day. If you are on a heart healthy diet, but you like a little bit of flavor, you can add some fresh herbs like garlic, oregano, parsley, or a little bit of cayenne for some spice. So we just have a cup of onion and a cup of brown rice. So we just get this all in the bowl, mixed together, and I usually use my hands. And this is great if you have kids who like to help you cook in the kitchen because they can mash it all together. It's also helpful on a weeknight because this recipe only takes 30 minutes to make. So it helps me to release some stress. I can do it really quickly and after a long day at work. So once you get it all incorporated, you just mix your meatballs and fold them into 8 balls. So 8 balls, so it's a pretty dense, heavy, thick meatball. It's about the size of the palm of my hand. So 2 of these meatballs will be about 265 calories. So, and if you want to make sure that they are all the same size, you can also use an ice cream scoop. We all have those at home to make sure they're just even and consistent in shape. But before you touch your ice cream scoop, make sure to take off your gloves because you don't want all that raw meat on your ice cream scoop to transfer any food contamination because we don't want anybody getting sick in our kitchen. So we just take the ice cream scoop and make it level and then scoop it out. So to braise them, you just pour over 2 cups of vegetable juice and then stick them in the oven for 30 minutes. So we'll come back in a little bit and show you what the final product looks like. And here is the final product. They look so moist and juicy, but let's make sure they're done. So we're going to take our handy dandy meat thermometer and test their temperature. So we want them to be at least 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. So these are perfectly right at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoy them, and you can always serve them for dinner with a little bit of the vegetable juice sauce on the side and a nice tossed salad. Have a good day. Enjoy your meatballs.
Wow, that was wonderful, all of you guys. We do have one question that came up in the chat box, and the question was related to, it's directed towards Chris. It's related to the no-till drill calibration. You mixed a variety of seeds together, and some of those seeds were different sizes. Does that come into play when you're calibrating the drill?
Yeah, that's a real tricky one. We fiddle with it a lot. You're able to change the depth of the seed by moving little washers right above each wheel. We've done this for a couple of years now, and we did get help from a farmer down the road. So the different depths of seed, the sunflower out of all the seeds would need to be the deepest, but we kind of shortchange them, but they still they still germinate very well. So yes and no, it's just kind of something you have to fiddle with and figure out. Those no-till drills are really great. There's some counties that actually have them for rent, or you maybe have a farmer down the road that you can borrow, which is what we do.
Okay, we have another question as well. And I'm not sure if this is for Chris or for Tim, but the question is, I had read that raising livestock releases greenhouse gases. Is this affected by buying grass-fed beef?
Tim, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So the main greenhouse gas that we associate with cattle anyway is methane, which is a part of the fermentation in the rumen, and which they belch up. So I think, and of course, I'm going to be a little biased on this, I guess, but when you look at the United States, we're very efficient and we have pretty low greenhouse gas emissions from our livestock industry relative to the rest of the world. And mainly that's because we're not clearing any rainforest to do this, or that has a huge factor on these gases. Methane is a huge greenhouse gas in the I think it's 10 times more than CO2, but it's very short-lived. So there are a couple things going on. So more greenhouse gases are produced during the forage part of the diet, and that is just because of natural fermentation and breaking down the forage. So I guess you could argue two ways here. You could say that the sooner we get them finished, which generally happens on a concentrate diet, the less methane. The drawback side to that is that we have to produce the grains and all that go into that. And so where is the trade-off? There's also a lot of research going on now to decrease the amount of methane that the cattle actually produce. So there are some feed additives that will actually decrease that. Certain amounts of the volatile fatty acids are cause more methane than others. So if we can sort of shift production one way or the other on those, we can greatly reduce the methane. But, you know, if you're looking at the United States and the work coming out of UC Davis, about 3% of the greenhouse gas emissions are actually coming from livestock production in this country. That is not true for the whole world.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Those are the only two questions that we have posted at this time. If someone else listening has a question, if you want to type that in, we'll try to get it answered for you.
It doesn't look like there's any other questions at this time. So if not, we will just thank you so much for attending today. And if you don't mind, please, when you leave the webinar, there'll be an option to take a real short survey about the program. And it really helps us if you could take the time and complete that survey, give us any feedback that you might have. And certainly we'd invite you to join us for upcoming sessions. Next week, we'll be taking a little pause because of the July 4th holiday, but we will return July 10th, and the focus for that session will be on herbs. So happy Friday, enjoy your weekend, and again, thank you for attending our session.